Hi, I'm Mia,
I'm Matt.
and this is the Kind Podcast. Today we are joined with Tamika Williams. Hello, Miss Tamika.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, we'd like to start off with a little bit of background about you. Can you tell us, just a little bit about who you are, what you do, where you come from, that kind of thing?
Of course. So I am a native Memphian. I'm from North Memphis, born and raised, college, all of those things, everything Memphis. I'm a hometown girl. When you think about, I guess, who Tamika is or where I come from a niche in Memphis that understands community. I was raised by my great grandmother.
Oh, wow.
Grew up with a lot of cousins and friends and in a community base that just hung outside and knew everybody. And I think in everything I've tried to do moving forward in life, I've always just tried to keep community at the forefront. I went to the University of Memphis, graduated from Northside High School, and went to the University of Memphis. Decided to stay home because I wanted to start giving back to my community. I'm a Girls Inc. girl. I grew up in Girls Inc. From the time I was 5. You're supposed to be 6 when you join Girls Inc. I was 5. I wanted to tag along with my sister, and they were like, "She's smart enough, right? She can stay." And I was working at Girls Inc. when I graduated high school. So I wanted to stay home to make sure I could keep that connection to what I was already doing at home, which I felt was giving me purpose. Um, and no one probably would know this, but I'm a journalism major, right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, never did anything with it.
I can relate.
I do like to write, but other than that, everything about life throws you curveballs and provides a path of where you should go, and you can write the story, but the story has its own way of fleshing itself out.
For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't know about the journalism thing at all.
Yeah.
And I've known you for a good little minute.
It's on the resume, but
So Girls Inc., you said that you stayed because you wanted to get back to the community.
yeah.
When you're kind of growing up, did you, from a young age at least, it seems like, did you kind of always know that you wanted to do some sort of community impact work? Or was it just kind of like fell into your lap or you just felt drawn to it?
Definitely some type of community impact work, but my original thought was that I was going to be a lawyer. Yeah, yeah. No. After doing 4 years of college, there was not another 3 in there for me.
Yeah.
For the first run.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was raised in a community, like I said, where I had a lot of role models.
Right.
And those role models came from Girls Inc. And a lady by the name of Gladys Cole at the time was like my inspiration, my mentor. And everything that she poured into every girl that came into that door, parents, friends, anybody just having that welcoming home touch to it, I knew I had to stay and create that legacy once she left Girls Inc. to say, hey, the legacy continues, right? And so I think a bit of me always knew that it would be something for public service, but I just let the boxes unravel for themselves. I didn't always try to make things come to fruition. I let things come to me.
Yeah, so it seems like it kind of like the path was built for you and you just decided to follow it.
In some ways, right? But yeah, different path now with government, but definitely it's been a journey.
Absolutely. And so when you are, I really want to learn more about journalism. What got you into that? I had no idea. Now I'm
So
intrigued.
I like to write, right? In high school, I wrote 2 novels.
Oh.
I never published them.
Period.
I never published them. They're just sitting on my shelf at home. But I do like to write. And when I went to the University of Memphis, I really didn't know exactly what I wanted to major in, but I know I wanted to stay true to my creative side and arts. And chose journalism because it was the closest thing to creative writing, to be honest.
Right.
And then it was more of a concentration in newspaper magazine. So at one point I thought I was going to be an editor and like have my own magazine and all these other different things. So a lot of times I had a lot of ideas, but the thing that always stuck was bringing those skills that I learned back to the girls that I was impacting.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's incredible. I can relate. I did an internship at Christian Brothers that was journalism, and I just realized that wasn't the path for me either. But the creative writing, I definitely relate to that. Um, I'm curious with your, you have this background of really passionate community inspiration, and that obviously follows through in what you do now. But we talk about how that kind of inspiration can get bogged down by a lot of the administrative work. And how do you kind of balance that in between of your passions and what's required of you, per paperwork and per guidelines?
So I think I've been really blessed, like to have roles where I have the autonomy to be as creative as I need to be. And in the new administration with Mayor Young, like everything's innovative. Everything is, hey, let's throw a lot of things to the wall, see what sticks. And that's what a lot of people need, because a lot of times we don't know all of the answers, but we get to those places when you have those rooms where it doesn't have to be a yes or a no. It could be a lot of different things that we can try to make things work. So I've been blessed to be in positions where there's always been room for creativity, where I was either working with children, which of course you need that creativity, or now in government where I was working with Opportunity Youth for about 2.5 years. And then now with the Joint Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, it's still a new innovative office. It's the first of its kind in the nation. There has never been a Joint Office of Neighborhood Safety. Traditionally, our offices, what we have is called an Office of Violence Prevention. And so all over the nation, you have these different offices of violence prevention. It may have different names, but essentially it's designed to address violence, especially gun violence, in communities where there are a lot of populations of people that are either becoming victims or the perpetrators of the violence. And so we're able to identify all of the different nonprofits, groups, faith-based leaders, anyone here in the city or county that wants and has a willingness to help those individuals. And so that brings nothing but creativity, because there's so many different people in Memphis and Shelby County that have big hearts and willing hands to step in and say, hey, I have an idea, and we get to listen to those ideas and put them into action. So always space for creativity in my life.
Absolutely.
That's great.
And I would love to talk a little bit about the population that you serve. And I want to take it back a little bit before your current role, because when we met 3 years ago,
3 years ago.
3 years ago, you were the creator and you ran Opportunity R3.
Yeah.
And so I have so many questions about that because it's a really cool program. When you're working with this specific population that we call Opportunity Youth, right? What are some nuances or what are some things about that specific population that kind of you feel drawn to? Because it seems like from the beginning of you entering this field to where you are now, they've been like a very stable population that you've really enjoyed and loved pouring into and working with.
To be honest, I didn't really know a lot about Opportunity Youth until probably about 2015, 2016. I was with communities in schools. I was working inside of Riverview School. I had been there for about 5 years. And I knew that when our students left Riverview, which is a K-8 school, well, pre-K through 8th grade school, they were still having challenges. And then they would go to high school and they would still have these challenges. And even if they graduated, they would still have these challenges. And so they would still find their way back to their K-8 school for support of what should I do next now that I've graduated, or what should I do next now that I couldn't graduate because this happened. And so that population to me became, what happens after high school if you don't go to college? What happens if you can't get a job right now because something's missing, or you don't have all of the skills that you need to do what you want to do? And who says you can't choose still what you do in life, right? Why do you have to work a job just to get money versus doing something that really brings you passion and purpose? And so when I transitioned from communities and schools and came over to government, it was more of a, hey, we want to do something with this population of 16 to 24. We know that they're not working, not in school, and this is what federal guidelines classify them as Opportunity Youth. And I just went for it. I was like, hey, these are going to be the same ones that have been coming to me and to the school and to other entities that I've known about just for extra support. How can we make sure that now as adults, they get what they need? And they are the most resilient group you could ever work with. And so they want to try. And when people want to try, you want to do as much as you can to help them. So what happened was I actually applied to be a recruiter for the community affairs office for the city of Memphis. And when I interviewed, he was like, "Yeah, you're not a recruiter." You're a creator. And he's like, I have this other idea for what you could do. And pitched it to me like a day later. And I was like, I'm on board, right? And so I had already had these ideas. I told you 2 novels sitting on the shelf, right? And so I had already had a lot of experience with Girls Inc. with creating curriculums for the girls, doing camping and all those different things and survival stuff just to throw different learning curves for them. And then with communities and schools provided a lot more of, hey, what happens in the school, what's lacking besides the education piece that they get in schools, social emotional awareness and things like that. And so I'd already started writing some of these things before I came on to this position, but how luck will have it and faith, they all panned out to where we were able to launch that program within 3 months of me getting in there. So literally it was fate that happened.
And can you speak to because I know the feeling of programming and rolling out and taking something from your head and putting it into the world and being like, let's just see what happens. But can you kind of talk about that, I guess that process and kind of like the feelings that you had attached to the quick turnaround, and then once you finally roll out a program and like monitoring, making sure that it's working and doing what it needs to do, like what is that experience like?
It's stressful.
Yes, it is.
One thing I know about creating something is that you hold it near and dear. You don't want anything to happen to it. It's your baby. But I was lucky enough to get a partner in Gerald Joyner, who came in as our case manager. I was the facilitator at the time. And even though I handled the classroom and curriculum, we knew there needed to be another piece of, hey, who else can I trust to be able to put our participants in the hands of this person to say, hey, this is your shadowing opportunity. This is your job opportunity. What does that look like outside of our walls? And so it was a lot of ups and downs. There were a lot of like missteps and like, hey, how long should the program be? What's missing from the curriculum? Right. We use input from the participants themselves to add things to the program. And I think that's a part of what a lot of programs are missing is that we have a lot of meeting spaces where people are in suits and ties and dresses, and that's great. But the people that you're serving should always have a place in what you do and what you provide for them, because who best to tell you? And so we were quickly corrected in some ways of, hey, this is what they would like, and this is what they would like more of, and this is what doesn't work. And so while we had the standard effective communication, we had the standard of resumes, we also wanted to include things like heavy topics that they wanted to talk about, that were really eye-opening, that they wanted to talk about, like voting. Like that opportunity, youth population, there was about 40,000 of them in 2016. And so now that number maybe have dropped a little bit. I heard about like 27,000 still in Shelby County, but that's a lot of people that are in a 16 to 24 age group that are not working and not in school. And it's something we have to address to make sure that our economy stays strong. And so when they started to want to talk about voting, we added voting registration, right? And so we were able to enroll 98% of our participants to be able to vote. It wasn't that they weren't capable of voting. It was just they just didn't have the navigation tools to be able to navigate that process of how to get registered and then to go and actually do it. If you've never voted before, it's an experience.
Yeah, it is. I love that you mentioned having them in the room. I think that you hit the nail on the head with programming across the country, and kind of like an archaic version of how people think of social services is like, a bunch of people in a government office being like, oh, here's something we need to do. Let's all come up with a program, and then we'll just put people in it. But the idea and what y'all did, the innovation of having people that you are serving also sit at the table with the creational aspect of what it's becoming, is beautiful to see. And it's like I've mimicked it over at the program we've done. The Hub tries to do it a lot now. But what did you see as far as an impact when it comes to their reactions of actually being asked and being heard, probably for the first time in their life for a lot of them?
It became a family. Like literally, like even though I'm not directly connected to the program right now, I still hear from someone at least once a week, either saying, I need this or this is going well, thank you. And I think the biggest tale of that was the first year we were able to do what we called a family reunion. And the family reunion was because a lot of participants that were coming down to the maybe 9th, 10th, 11th cohort was saying, well, what happened to cohort 1, 2, and 3? Like, where are they, right? And they would see people pop up every now and then, and we would have others come back in and talk about their journey through R3. But they wanted to know more. They wanted to know the cousins they had never met and lived in the same city as them. And so I brought all the cousins together, and we had our first family reunion in 2023. And we had about 180 opportunity youth that showed up that night, and it was pouring rain. and it was in December, so it was really cold. And so for them to show up just shows you the impact of what that program did for them. And then knowing that even though we're born into families, I think the greatest thing about the world that we live in is that you get to create the family that you desire. And so we're not always given the cards that we would like, but you're able to shuffle them. You're able to get a different deck if you put yourself in the right position around the right people to make those changes.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think the term family is a beautiful one to use. And it kind of leads me to one of my questions I have, because I'm always interested in people's perspective on this. You know, working with individuals as a career in general is like a very difficult balance beam between this is what I'm doing professionally, but I also personally care for people. So how do you manage both that relationship, but also your own personal sanctity, like your own personal sanity? You know, it's very hard for us to not take work home with us. You know, when that opportunity doesn't work out, or, you know, someone makes a wrong decision that you poured a lot into, like how do you balance the professional side versus the personal side?
So I think there is a balance. But I think sometimes the balance is always going to be out of whack for somebody that really, really cares.
Right.
I don't think there's ever a time where it's less on the side of, hey, it's about me right now. I have a 6-year-old son. He just turned 6. I was about to say 5. But he just turned 6 on March 22nd. And he's been with, you know, in these different spaces with different people, and he's grown accustomed to saying, hey, I want to go see your work, I want to go see this person or that person. And I think what we do naturally as caregivers or people that want to help our community is you can't separate your entire personal life when you're getting to know their personal life. And so it's intentional for me to make sure that my family and my son know exactly what I'm doing and who I'm serving, because the legacy must continue. He may not choose to do the work that I do, but I want him to always see that there are people out here that need help. There are people out here that are willing to give that help, and will you be a part of that in some way? It's very important for anyone that's in government, faith-based leaders, nonprofit entities, for-profit businesses to understand that you serve a community and we don't exist without that community. So we have to make sure that that community is okay. So I don't think there's like a perfect balance. I do have my personal time that I'm just mommy, right? But there is always going to be a connection, and that's where you fulfill a lot of your needs, is to make sure that those worlds don't live separately, because you're not two people.
Yeah. That's really beautifully said. And I think it's so true that just from seeing the people that I've worked with at the hospitality hub, you know, when they're truly invested in it, it's not a clear like night and day, Jacqueline, Mr. Hyde, you know, that separation. So that makes sense. I am really curious as someone who isn't as familiar with, you know, the nonprofits in this population, what that transition looked like for you going from R3 to a government position. Like what did that movement look like for you, and how did it affect you?
So R3 is actually a government position. So a little different. So when Communities in Schools was the last nonprofit entity that I worked with. But when I came over to City of Memphis government, I was with the Office of Community Affairs. And what the Office of Community Affairs does is provide a lot of second chance programs, a lot of direct service programs that normally or traditionally your city government or county government may not do. And so there was reentry there, which helped that second chance population. There was PART, which is formerly CLERB, Police Advisory Review Committee now. And so they hear complaints about, hey, this went on with law enforcement. How could we make it better? How could we fix it? You have Public Service Corps, which is actually a program for those that may have had a hard time getting a job that would like to work in city government. They're able to work part-time, morning shifts, afternoon shifts, and they pick up a lot of different trash, blight control. They're really like diligent with making sure that those individuals transition over into full-time city employment when the time is right. And then you also have like what we would call the neighborhood program, which at the time was the Certified Neighborhood Leadership Training Program, but it's now called NEXT, the Neighborhood Excellence Training Program. But essentially those neighborhood associations and things like when you're wanting to get your neighborhood in some way to become a community, helping them to actually understand what that looks like and if you need a 501c3 or do you not. And different neighborhoods want different things. But then came Opportunity R3, which was a program that was traditionally not housed in government. But it was a government program. So there was the first time they had ever created a program where we would actually bring in individuals, teach a curriculum, and then for this age group population that wasn't with youth services. And then we would make sure that they got employment, whether that was city employment or outside of the city and county scope employment. And we paid them a stipend to do those things. And that program came about because of the ARPA funding. So at the time, there was, resources to make sure that that happened. And Mayor Strickland was really adamant of saying, hey, we have a lot of other things going on in the city. This is something we don't have. Let's create it now that we have the funding to do so. Mayor Young kept it going, so it's still going on. And so now it'll be city funded. And that's great that the Young administration saw that need. But that was a government program and still is. So what it looks like differently now is that I'm appointed. And so that means that, so this office being a new entity and being a little higher in government, we had to think about how could we position this office to make sure that all of the nonprofits, all of the individuals that have a willingness to serve and want to help the community, how could they still intertwine with what we were doing? And that is why the joint office is housing the Office of Community Affairs. But to get back to your question, so the government side didn't necessarily happen from the switch from R3 to now being deputy director. It happened from being with Communities in Schools to now with government. And so the shift for me happened, to be very honest, because in nonprofit, there was a lot of waiting on contracts to be signed by either Shelby County Schools or Communities in Schools. And so every year for maybe the last 3 years of me being with them, you had a waiting period where school starts in August. I wasn't getting into my school until probably about October or November. And by then, by me working with truancy and chronic absenteeism in the schools, most of my caseload kids were actually already chronically absent by then because I'm not in the school. And so it came to a head the last year because um, this was like a time where we would have like a lot of back and forth with kids in the morning. They were really like high angst. Um, and you had like a group of kids that you would actually have to see every morning, right? It was just a regular routine for us. And while I was away at another school, because my school hadn't gotten a chance to get their contract signed yet, one of my participants shot and killed another student. And so I have one in jail and one that's deceased, and I couldn't take anymore.
Yeah.
So I decided to leave. And then I said, hey, what else could I do? This doesn't stop here, but it's just the nonprofit sector of waiting on someone else for funding or to say, okay, continue to do the work in the places you know the work is needed. And so government was calling because government was another pillar that wanted to work with youth, but also wanted to be able to keep their work going regardless. It's a well-oiled machine. It doesn't stop. And so I needed that.
Yeah.
That was something I needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this because I didn't know you were appointed. How cool does that feel to say? I'm just curious. Like I would be so cool to be like, I got appointed by the mayor. Like, but what is that? I mean, what is that like? What does that entail? Like, do you get a call from Mayor Young like, hey, stepping in office, need you to go do this? Like, what does that feel like? And like, what is that process?
So I do have frequent conversations with Mayor Young, but most of my direct contact is with Reginald Boyce, who's the Director of Community Affairs. But there is no stopping me if I need Mayor Young to pick up the phone and call him. So that is pretty cool. But I think that's one thing that makes the city of Memphis and working for the city of Memphis so cool. It's like you get a chance to really see how real people are. And I know we hear all the things on social media or people come up with their own, magical worlds of what's really happening in government, but you really have a family there too. And so I get the best of both worlds because I'm with Mayor Lee Harris and with Mayor Young. So even though I'm a city employee, the joint office is a combination of county government and city government. I get to see both sides. My office is actually in the Shelby County building, so I live with the cousins.
Yeah, and I think addressing like the issue of like everyone, I don't know if the term would be like shadow government, but I definitely know what you're talking about, where like people hear your government work and they just automatically, there's like 50 different things they just thought in their head that they attribute to you, and it's not true at all. Do you find yourself having to combat that like way of thinking a lot?
Oh, most definitely. I get a lot of requests. You get a lot of, hey, you all, should provide this or should provide that. But there's systems in place that have been in place long before I got here or this administration. And there's a lot of protocols that you have to go through to get a lot of things done. What this administration has tried to do is to make those things work faster, more seamlessly for people to navigate. Our new website just launched April 2nd. Don't know if you had a chance to check it out, but the City of Memphis website looks a little different now, and there will be even more updates and changes. So our Chief Houston with communications, she's on it when it comes to, hey, make sure the information is there for people to get it. And so I think a part of what I've been able to navigate is now that we do have a joint office, I'm able to navigate a little bit more for people to send them to the right spaces so they're not always ending up in the wrong hands. But I think for our administration, there's never been a wrong door. It's know your people and know where to send them.
Yeah, without a doubt. And since I've known you, like every time I bring someone up, you're like, "Oh, I know them." I'm like, "Okay, well, I got to work on my contacts." But I do want to speak about the work you're currently doing with the Joint Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. And you alluded to it earlier, but I do want to give more of a presence to like what you're currently doing, and then what problems y'all are trying to address and what you're trying to create. So, can you kind of speak to your new position as deputy director, and then kind of like what are the goals and missions, and what are we trying to accomplish in the city of Memphis through this?
So The joint office itself, just going back to it, is traditionally called an Office of Violence Prevention. Here, it's the Joint Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. It's a combination of Shelby County government and city government coming together for what's the second time in history to make a joint office. This is the first violence prevention office. We also have a planning and development office that is joint. And so what that looks like is we have a director, Valerie Matthews, who is with Shelby County government, and then you have me. I'm the deputy director on the city side. And so the reason the office came about is because there's been a lot of disparities in funding and making sure that, hey, if we are one of the most highly ranked cities for violence, or we know that we have a need to really provide a lot more resources for our individuals that are really suffering, how could we do that, and where is the funding for it? So when we launched the office in November of 2024, the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which is no longer in existence, was here. Director Greg Jackson, Deputy Director Greg Jackson. And he came down and spoke about the disparity of funding, saying that Atlanta got about 400 plus million, and Memphis and Shelby County got about 26 million over the last couple of years with just funding for violence intervention and prevention programs. And we knew that there was a problem. Memphis is way larger than Atlanta, and we have a lot more crime. And so we're not blind to those things to say, hey, how could we pull that funding down? So instead of a city government applying for those funds and a county government applying for those same funds, now you have a joint office where they see we're standing together to get those funds. And so it's going to be a game changer to not only get those funds and bring them into government, but what people might not know is that those funds are going to be dispersed to the CBOs that we have here. And so those nonprofits that are really ingrained in doing the heavy lifting of direct services for those that are in need, whether that's through reentry, crisis management, housing, mental health services, whatever that looks like, we're going to be investing in those nonprofits to make sure that they have the money to do what they need to do to help those individuals. And then a part of also what we would like to do is to inform. So we have 4 drivers for the office. We have inform, integrate, invest, innovate. And so I've spoken about invest a little bit, but I'll back up and go to inform. So inform is not only resource sharing, making sure that others know where the resources are in our communities, where are your nonprofits, right? But then also about data. So we know there's been a disparity in, hey, why do I have to go to this website and get data, and then go to this website for MPD and get data, and then go to the DA's office and get this data about crime disposition? And so a part of what the joint office is tasked to do is to create that data sharing platform for a lot of different agencies that people want to know what's going on in our community and how could we help. And so we want to make sure that that data is digestible for people. And so a part of what we do is to integrate, which is convening. So we're the big convener. And what that looks like is bringing a lot of people in place in a similar space where there's been a lot of silos. There's been a lot of great work being done in Memphis and Shelby County, but for the longest, you've had so many entities that just think it's just them to do everything, and it's burning them out. And so a part of what we do is create different meeting spaces for individuals depending on their impact of what they would like to do. And they're coming together to share common data. They're coming together to make a plan, a strategic plan that I'll get to in a minute. And then we're also coming together to figure out and brainstorm what's missing. What's missing from national models that say you should have all of these different things to address everything you need to know about violence and crime in your city, and we may be missing a few of those things. So how could we now fill that gap and then also invest in that gap? And then last, innovate. So your innovate is going to be your strategic plan, which is about 3 to 5 years of, hey, this is what we would like to do and continuously do until we see if it really worked, right? And so we've had a lot of deep conversations. Mary Young has brought in national TTA partners to just talk to city and county leaders about this is what we would like to do together. So it's not just about the joint office either. It's about everybody in city government coming together to break those silos of where we're just across the plaza from each other.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned silos because like it's almost been like a common thread through a lot of
Yeah.
our podcasts. I mean,
Yeah.
like a lot of people in the space, I think sharing that thought of there's so much amazing work being done, but no one's connected. And then I also think that part of the issue that comes with that, especially with the particular subject of violence, violence is a really difficult subject to talk about, to bring up, and to address. But
Yep.
the true fact and what is encompassing about violence is that it spills into every other factor and facet of social work. You know, incarceration, reentry, housing, you know, workforce. Like, it's a really hard thing to go in there and like maneuver. And so whenever you guys have been having these conversations, what is the goal? I'm assuming obviously like reducing violence. But when it comes to innovation, is part of the innovation going to be implementing plans to give other options to people and to actually make those intervention points have successful outcomes? Because I think like a lot of what I see with Opportunity Youth and what we've spoken to about like 1,000 times when it comes to OI is they have a bad rap, but they also never get the chance to try something. And so, like when it comes to the innovation piece, who are you looking to like partner up with, and what will that like look like in the 3 to 5 year plan?
So it's not that we're looking to partner. I think that it's everything is coming to us in a way where people already had these ideas. People already had the willingness. We just opened the doors.
Got it.
And so we're having different convenings, like I said. And so the largest one we just hosted at Bridges on March 19th. It'll be another one on April 23rd at Riverside Church on 3rd Street. And so we're making our way around a little bit. And so whereas you have Mary Young that does the one Memphis Town Halls, where people come in and they may tell the challenges, in these convening spaces for Safer Memphis 365, it's all about solution-driven ideas. How can we as a team, as individuals, as community, come together, create, innovate, include younger generations of people that are actually in the trenches and in these lived experiences. And so our first meeting, we had about 180 to maybe about 200 people that showed up to Bridges. And it was an amazing time to just speak about the possibilities for once, you know, just to talk about, hey, this is my idea and let's write that down. Let's not just hear it. Let's write that down and let's go back to it at our next meeting and make sure we have all of those solutions together. And so the other meetings may be a little more, to be honest, boring for a general public, but Safer Memphis 365 and what we're calling courageous conversations with a younger crowd. They're coming to fruition and they're going to be, I think, game changers for what innovation could really look like, because it's coming from the people, not from just government.
Love that.
So that sounds all like great examples of success of like what you're working towards and what your plans are showing. And I'm just kind of curious for the community that I'm kind of coming from in this conversation is the community of like not knowing and like I fall victim of the silos. I know certain things happen here and that kind of thing, but you know, more education as I have these conversations. But we have a lot of discussions about what success is in different organizations, and I mean even at the hub, we don't really measure success because it's so different for different people. But in your role, can you share like a highlight moment that you've felt that, you know, for the people who, you know, might say certain things about government entities that are fighting safety, this is a highlight story that I stand by and that I know good work is being done?
I mean, I think even in the 5 months that we've really just been on the ground, we've seen some signs of, hey, yeah, this is going to work, right? And that keeps me going every day.
Yeah.
And so I won't name names, but I will say that a part of what we would like to do, and we know that people are most in dire need of, is funding. And so we do know that right now, federal and state, the light switch is off for a lot of things. And so one of the things I think we were apprehensive about is what happens next. And so our mayors have been very vocal in saying that, hey, regardless, we're here to support our joint office. And so in this new fiscal year, there's money that will be allocated for the joint office for that purpose, right? But we knew that the work doesn't stop there. That's June. And so we've partnered with LIST, local initiatives supporting corporation. I could have that wrong, but LIST, LISC. And so LIST is serving as not only our fiscal partner, but also as a beacon of hope for those right now in need for smaller micro grants. And so even at one of our first impact meetings, they allowed nonprofits that had been coming to us where we haven't been able to fund anyone just yet for those different micro grants. They were able to let those individuals pitch to them what they do for the highest risk individuals for $5,000 to $50,000. And so those funds and grants will be going out really soon as well. So you still have a lot of ways with us of finding ways to really support the work and continue the work. And that just goes to show you that Memphis and Shelby County is very resilient, and you do have partners that have funding that are willing to really step in the need of where government right now is at a standstill in some ways. But I guess the greatest success story for me came about 2 weeks ago at the Safer Memphis 365 meeting. One of the young ladies that came to our press conference and one of our first meetings just about what we call the landscape analysis. The National Offices of Violence Prevention came here, 2-day training with about 40 different organizations just to see what we have to really tackle those categories that we've been talking about. And this particular young lady and her husband came, and they didn't have really a nonprofit established, but they knew they had a big heart and wanting to do some work. And we were able to get her started with getting her nonprofit together and everything. And she connected with one of our Safer Communities grantees that we were able to grant funds to in September. And because we had helped this other person get all of her paperwork and her ideas in order, she was able to pass that forward to her.
That's beautiful.
And so we talked about a different grant opportunity that came within our Clean Memphis initiative through the Blight Project. And that young lady called me 2 weeks ago, and she was so thankful. She said, because you helped somebody that helped me, and then you answered my call every time I call, I was able to fill out my paperwork, and I just got awarded $57,000.
Oh,
Wow.
my
And
goodness.
And so that's just a testament of it's not just about the government helping someone, but it is about us empowering others to help someone as well.
What a great answer.
Yeah, I mean, that's beautiful. And I love the idea of passing it along. I think a lot of times, like this type of work, like you do all these amazing things, and if you're in this field, you're not doing it to get like a praise or get like a thank you. And a lot of times those don't happen, but you just get that feeling of the fulfilling feeling of seeing someone in a better spot than when they met you at.
Yep.
But I do want to circle back to the courageous conversations. That seems really intriguing to me and something that's super needed, because I think a lot of times, especially around violence, the scarcity around conversation is what leads to the continuation of the problem. And so to have those talks, can you kind of talk about like what are the purpose of those, and like what's the specific population you're engaging with and why them?
So Courageous Conversations is actually probably one of the most vibrant parts of what we would like to do as a joint office. So you have the OY group, the 16 to 24-year-olds. You have a smaller, younger population of 14, 15-year-olds. And then you have maybe some that are already getting into to workforce from college and maybe a little older, 25, 26. And so all in that different range, you have a young generation of first-time voters, those that are first time getting a job, trying to figure out like, what am I going to do with my life? And I think that's the Memphis that we've been missing for a while. Like, we can't continue to just talk to the people that have it together, or at least like they look like they have it together. It's really the people that we want to see what the next generation can bring.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are the next generation. And so it's important for us as a joint office to lift up those voices in Memphis and Shelby County to say, hey, we want to hear you. This is where we are, or we'll meet you where you are. And so a part of those conversations is having heavy discussions about some things that may traumatize young people and make them want to leave Memphis. We want them here, right? There may be conversations about your identity, your history. There's a lack of knowing. And when you have a lack of knowing in our community, you can fall victim to a lot of things because you don't know who you are, where you come from. And so not just knowing the history of your heritage, but knowing the history of Memphis and what it used to stand for and what it can potentially continue to stand for in the future is pivotal, that those individuals are the ones that tell that story. And so we've been pitching maybe 4 or 5 ideas around, but I'll talk about one. So one of the most recent conversations is laughing through trauma. We do understand that Memphis is a check-in city. so
Yes.
so kids, when we were in school, we checked. I'm pretty sure they still do.
Yeah.
But a part of that is strengthening. Like
Yeah.
you learn your weaknesses and you like, okay, I've heard that one before. It doesn't hurt anymore. But I heard a comedian, Bert Kreischer, talk about, yeah, I love Bert. It's my personal life. But
Bring that back.
but he spoke about not crying in front of his kids. He had to put his dog down and he was like, I'm not crying in front of my kids. But he was like, I can cry if I laugh because I can laugh too hard and cry. So it was like his hidden way of crying. And I was like, but what if that's what our kids need or the young people need? Like, what if we become so desensitized to things that we don't understand that it's really trauma that we're going through? It's not normal
Yeah.
to see that type of violence every day. It's not normal to feel fearful in the neighborhood that you are growing up in or that have lived in your entire life. It's not okay for you to fear going to school. It's not okay for you to, have a fear of police when they're here to protect and serve. And so how could we bring entities and partners together to show the human nature of it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to not stay like in that way? And so how could we talk about trauma and pain through comedy and hosting comedy shows
Oh,
to talk
love.
about some of that pain, where you do have clinicians, you do have comedians, local comedians, to talk about some of the things that may go on in Memphis and have those young people connect with, hey, this happens to me too, but to talk about some of those things in a healthy way through laughter.
That's a brilliant idea.
I literally have goosebumps. I love that because it's so common in really OI, like what you 16 to 24, but I mean older adults under 30 typically too. But like there's like a weird idea around like if you show emotion, it's like a vulnerable spot and that makes you weak. And like a lot of like the work that people do, I think in this sector is wrapping around people to understand like it's okay not to be okay, like what you said. I think that's
Yep. And it's a growing point. I
Yeah.
mean, for a long time, I felt like that. I'm a Memphian. So I feel like, hey, you can't be out here crying, But,
Yes.
but at the same time, I understand that it's cleansing. It's a healthy thing to do. Showing emotion doesn't make you weak. Showing emotion makes you human.
and it's
And
okay.
we're missing a lot of human nature around here.
That's like what the Hub Hall podcast for me and Matt came up with the youth there. It's so much trauma.
That's wild.
And y'all gonna have to bring them to one of the,
will.
the shows too. Like
Well,
we
And
want
just talking
everybody.
about it and what was it? We trying to make it to where you don't stigmatize people for having some issues that they going through. We try to get that to you, so you don't check people because they want you probably going through it too.
Yeah. Or the even worse part, because like I almost feel like it's like a case manager. I have the opposite where I don't I don't cry in general, which is probably an issue, but like I don't cry because I don't want them making like I don't want that impacting them or them feeling like I'm sorry for them or I'm just doing like I want them to feel empowered when they're with me. But and I won't mention names, but we've had stories like we have a story of a young lady who had to resuscitate her 3-year-old brother because her mother nodded off on fentanyl and the baby was passing away because it ate some of the fentanyl. And to hear her describe that story in a language and tonality of like normalcy, like, oh yeah, that just like happened, to me is like a huge red flag in the sense of she felt like that was something that she either it was just like another day or it wasn't something that would really be impactful to her, but it spilled out into every other portion of her life. And to not take like the brevity and the seriousness of that situation and how it impacted her, I could see when she began to talk about it and how she spoke about it, it was like it didn't even register to her like that isn't common, that's not okay, and it's okay that you were affected by it.
Yep.
But she couldn't feel that, and we see that a lot with the youth over at Hubble Hall and the youth that we had to go over to R3. I mean, it always shocks me, but it always makes me feel like I want to be the person that you're like you feel okay to cry around. Like that to me is a huge sign. I've had like people in my office that have cried before, more times than not. And I always look at it as a good sign, especially like the young men when they come in. I had a young guy whose friend was shot and killed, and he found out. And then his other friend was shot and killed at the funeral because it was a gang-related violence situation out in Arkansas. And I'd walked in, he was like pacing back and forth down the hallway on the phone, screaming, cussing, yelling, breaking stuff in his room. And like when I sat down and actually talked to him about it, what you would think the reaction was because his friend passed away, but his reaction was because he couldn't do anything about it and because he wasn't there. And to me, like I wanted to highlight, like, though it's a really awful situation, like the character behind you having such a strong draw to the people that you love is something you need to invest in and keep growing within yourself because it's way too common. I think like what you said with violence in the city of Memphis, like the fact that we have now an office that is going to be directed towards addressing that and innovating it and funding it is, I really can't wait to see the impact it has because I really think that conversations need to be had and people need to address the issue, not in a way of like we're doing something wrong, but in the way of, hey, I'm sure everyone here is tired of this. And I'm sure everyone here is at a point where we need to make a change. And I'm really excited to see where it takes off and, I hope to be part of it. But I really think those courageous conversations are just beautiful. Like I literally had goosebumps when you said that just because I know I relate to it so much with the people that we serve. And I know that hiding behind a lot of the smiles that we see every single day is a lot of pain and a lot of pain that has nowhere to go. So I think it's beautiful and I'm really excited to see where it goes. As we close down, now is the fun portion of the podcast.
I was like so tuned into that. Sorry, that was y'all's conversation just now was just fantastic. It was like poetry.
She's
but
a
yes,
poet.
I'm a poet. Sorry.
I love it.
That was when you said creative writing. I was like, yes.
There's
okay.
so many secret writers. That's like the 5th person that's been like, yeah, I have a poetry degree. I'm like, what? And I do want to know about the novels, but we won't do it on the podcast unless you want
Yes,
to talk about them.
same. I have so many questions.
Just going to throw that out there.
You get the first one because it's yours.
My favorite one. Okay. What's the disaster this time? I try to change up what happens to you and why you're on the desert island every time. Let's go with you're on a ski boat and you're going through the Bermuda Triangle and then
Lord.
you funnel into a windstorm and then you pop up on a desert island. For whatever reason, you have 3 DVDs with movies and a DVD player. What 3 movies are you watching for the rest of your life?
For the rest of my life, I'm going to watch Twilight.
Stop it right now. I could do a backflip.
And I want
I
all
love
of them.
that.
So all 3. I don't.
You going to all 3 Twilight?
I love her. You're fabulous. Oh my gosh. I'm literally watching. Anytime it rains, I'm like, Twilight.
Yes.
What an answer.
You
That
have to
is
be there.
amazing.
During that time.
Oh
wouldn't
my
get bored?
gosh.
No. Anytime I see it on TV, I have to stop and watch. I can be looking for something completely different.
Are you
I'm learning a lot about you. I was not expecting that.
in
I
love with that answer?
thought it was going to be some heavy hitters or some things I didn't know, but Twilight threw me off. Okay.
Are you team Jacob
I
or
don't want
team?
to be heavy on the island by myself.
Twilight's heavy. No? I haven't seen it, so.
It's
first
dramatic,
one's
but it's
hilarious.
That's where like Taylor Lautner turns into like a wolf like mid run.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Are you Team Jacob or Team Edward?
I do not like being cold, so I'm Team Jacob. I thought
Fair.
that just didn't play
Gotta
out
keep you
right,
warm.
but yeah, I'm not picking the vampire.
I'm obsessed with that answer. That was fantastic.
that threw me for a loop. I'm shocked. Hey,
He's so confused. Okay, autobiography. If you were to write one, what would the title be?
My title would be From Porch to Purpose.
Oh,
and we got the best one so far.
yeah, that was incredible.
Like I remember like my best memories as a kid. Like I know people would say like, hey, growing up as a kid, some things are really crazy in Memphis, but I think I had a really great childhood. And so even though of course you can't stay away from things that are bound to happen, but I remember community. I remember sitting on the porch during rainy days with my great grandmother and just waving at cars as they drove by or people as they walked by, or just being outside and just seeing everything from the porch as a kid, because you weren't going very far. but I missed it. Like I think our community misses the porch, like the community. And so we don't know our neighbors. We're isolated. We're in our own worlds or our phones in another world, which is not ours. And from that porch and that community drove everything for purpose for me. So
Gorgeous
beautiful.
answer.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, before we end it, is there anything that you want to plug as far as like things that are happening, events, stuff that you want people to know about? I think this will come out. I don't know. We could really roll it out around the dates, so we have a lot saved. So
I know the next Safer Memphis 365 is April 23rd. It will be held at Riverside Baptist Church on 3rd Street. Not sure exactly what the number is on 3rd Street, but I'll get it to you all. And then that will be a public forum. So that's anyone city or countywide that has a willingness to come and tackle some of those solutions. Come all. It's normally from 5 to 7. Yeah, free parking, all those things are free. If we have a courageous conversations before that, or maybe not before that, but right around that time, I'll definitely let you all know.
Please.
Because I'm really trying to get that one going.
yes.
But definitely also like bring anyone that you're always welcome. Anyone that you see fit to have these conversations with. We're really wanting our public, the ones that don't normally get a chance to have that voice, to come to these spaces. They need to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have a social media presence where like information will continuously put out, or is on the website?
Yeah. So so right now the website, like I said, the City of Memphis website just relaunched.
Right.
The Joint Office website does need some updates, so they're coming. But the site is memphistn.gov/joint office, or you can get to it from shelbycountyn.gov/joint office.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very
Thank
much
you
for
so
coming
much for
on.
coming.
I love the conversation, and
I've learned so much.
you'll be
Thanks.
back. You'll be back on.
Yes.
I will be back.
Yes.
Yes, there'll be plenty more to talk about.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.